I'm Janice. As David mentioned, I work as a project assistant at Humber College. I joined Surviving Hate as a student journalist over a year ago, and then David was kind enough to let me stay on as an investigative journalist. So that's it about me. A little bit about Surviving Hate for those who don't know. Surviving Hate is an investigative journalism project that was created over 2.5 years ago by David Weiss and Martha Troyan, who's an indigenous reporter. And one of the main motives behind creating Surviving Hate and conducting this investigative journalism project was to bridge the gap in hate crime reporting that exists in Canada and analyze incidents of anti-Indigenous racism across hospitals in Canada. So a major part about this investigation and bridging this gap was just analyzing and finding out how big of a gap exists. So that's it about the project. So far, we've released and published 4 different stories, and I've been lucky enough to have reported on 2 of the stories and assisted in research on 1 of the stories, and we've got a few more stories coming up that I'll be a part of. So as part of Surviving Hate, we worked on multiple original data sets. We worked on compiling different data sets, but today I'll be walking you all through the process that we followed in compiling one of our biggest data sets that focuses on incidents of anti-Indigenous racism in hospitals across Canada. Okay. So our first phase was gathering data. We began with a quick internet analysis. We used a lot of Google Analytics tools and Google Advanced Search to scour the internet and create a database of all incidents that we could find, all anti-Indigenous racism incidents in hospitals that we could find, and created this database. And after that, what we did was go through different social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, different groups, Instagram, and find out any mentions of such incidents, and we included those in our database. Now, this was, as a student, I expected this. I was like, okay, if I'm beginning to create a database, that is what I'm going to be doing. I'll be just going through the internet. What surprised me was word of mouth. So when we were interviewing people and when we were talking to different organizations that collect hate crime data, a finding that recurringly occurred and showed up was that a lot of victims of hate crimes and racism often don't speak up. Often, and I mean, if you check Statistics Canada's report, they've mentioned that almost 80% of hate incidents are not officially recorded. People are scared to talk, and as an immigrant, I understand the reason why. You're scared that you'll be treated mistreated, and treated in the same way by people in authority, and different like immigration issues. And then that was our finding in the hate crime story, one of our first stories. And then we went ahead and created a separate database asking different institutions, health institutions across the country, like health authorities, hospitals, colleges. We asked whether, okay, if somebody comes to you and says that, hey, I've been a victim of racism, could you help me with this? We asked them whether they track this data. They track the complaint data that they get. And a lot of institutes said that they don't. We then created another database that looked at the complaints process in hospitals. And we asked that, okay, once y'all get complaints of racism, what do y'all do? How do y'all process it? Another finding, a lot of these hospitals don't record these incidents because they never process it. So it was clear to us that, okay, there are way too many incidents that are not mentioned on the internet, so doing an internet analysis is not going to help us create this database accurately. So we reached out to a lot of health advocates in Indigenous communities that we had interviewed for our stories, and we asked them to spread the word and connect us with people that they personally knew went through these incidents and people that they'd helped out with previously. So that was interesting. for me, personally. So now that we'd collected all of this data, it was time to verify it. So our first verification process was gathering official documents. That would be government reports, press releases, coroner's inquest reports, and other official reports that we could find. One interesting experience for me was one of the cases that I was working on was verifying this incident in the late 80s and early 90s where a couple of women had complained about being forced to get abortions without anesthesia. And this was sourced to a report that wasn't on the internet. We reached out to the government of the Northwest Territories, and they did not have the report. Their archives didn't have the report. So how do we verify this? So surprisingly, they had meeting minutes of a lot of legislative assemblies. So what I did was go through all of these meeting minutes, look at all the drama that was happening, and find a lot of mentions about these incidents and verify it that way. Our second verification process was contacting family members or the victims. So Kunal Chowdhury, one of my colleagues who worked on this primarily, along with Daniel Orr and Martha Troyan, they spent months and months calling up family members and victims and verifying these incidents personally. And our third verification process was just going through news articles and social media posts. We used newspapers.com, which is a website that just archives old newspapers. So we went through a lot of newspaper clippings that from news organizations that currently either don't exist, never had a website, and all of that. So we went through these newspaper clippings, found people's names, contacted them separately, and that's how the verification process worked. Now, final step. Now that we've got all of this data, we've verified all of this data, how do we put it out there in a meaningful way? So for us, something that was really important was to highlight the many, many stories that we had received. And something that we really wanted to highlight was the fact that some of our incidents were from way back in the 1950s, and they showed a very similar pattern to the incidents that were happening in the past few years. So we were like, how do we put this data out there? So what we decided to do was, all of the stories that we've published so far, we decided to make it a human-centric story and just talk about the people's stories and use the data and convey the data by creating infographics and using different data visualization elements to portray it. So we thought our main focus would be just stories, and the data could be a supporting part. And David played a huge role in creating these data visualizers. So that's it from me. If y'all have any questions, y'all could ask me right now, or y'all could reach out to us later, and y'all could also reach out to Kunal. Please.